My grandfather left me everything. Millions, a company, a mansion, and my family has never forgiven me. My own father stopped speaking to me the day the will was read. He looked at me like I was a monster. And for 20 years, I believed him. But last month, I found a letter hidden in my dead aunt's desk. A letter that changes everything I thought I knew. It turns out, the person who destroyed my family wasn't me. It was the one person I trusted most. My mother knew the truth the whole time. She watched my father hate me, she watched my cousins disappear, and she never said a word. Now I have to decide. Do I expose her and lose the only family I have left? Or do I keep her secret and carry this guilt forever? My name is Catherine. This is the story of an inheritance that didn't just divide us. It destroyed us. And the worst part is just beginning. The years that followed Aliner's birth were the richest of my life. I had always thought of richness in terms of money, of assets, of the zeros in a bank account. But watching my daughter grow, I learned a new definition. Richness was her first laugh, a gurgling sound that filled the mansion with light. Richness was the way she reached for me in the night, her small hand grasping my finger with complete trust. Richness was watching my mother teach her to paint, smearing colors across paper with joyful abandon. Richness was Mark teaching her to climb trees in the very same woods where we had played as children. Richness was Lily reading her stories on the porch swing, voices changing for each character, Aliner's eyes wide with wonder. David was a natural father. His patience, honed by years of teaching teenagers, made him perfect for the slow, repetitive work of raising a child. He could read the same book 10 times in a row without complaint. He could answer why questions until exhaustion set in. He could sit on the floor for hours, building block towers for Aliner to knock down, laughing every time they fell. My mother thrived in her role as grandmother. She painted a series of murals in Aliner's room, scenes from the forest outside, complete with hidden animals and fairy tale creatures. Aliner would lie in her crib, staring at the walls, pointing and naming each creature as she learned to talk. Bunny, she would say. Bird, squirrel. My mother beamed with pride at each new word. Mark became the fun uncle, the one who pushed swings too high and allowed cookies before dinner. He had a way with children that surprised us all, given his years of isolation. But Aliner brought out something soft in him, something that had been buried under years of anger and running. He told her stories about the fort he had built as a boy, about adventures in the woods, about a time when the world was full of magic. Lily moved closer, unable to stay away from her niece. She rented a small house in town, just a few miles from the mansion, and became a regular presence in our lives. She wrote her articles during the week and spent weekends with us, reading to Aliner, taking her to the park, teaching her the names of seashells and birds. The mansion, once a place of cold formality and painful memories, became something new. It became a home. Children's toys dotted the formal living room. Finger paintings adorned the refrigerator. The sound of laughter echoed through hallways that had known only silence for decades. But healing, as I had learned, is never complete. The past has a way of reaching forward, touching the present in unexpected ways. When Aliner was 4 years old, we received a letter that would shake our carefully constructed peace. It came on a Tuesday, a plain white envelope with no return address. I almost threw it away, thinking it was junk mail, but something made me open it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, unsigned. "I know what really happened," it read. "I know about the night your grandfather died. If you want the truth, come to this address. Alone, come alone, or you'll never know." Below the words was an address, a street I didn't recognize in a part of Portland I rarely visited. I read the letter 3 times, my heart pounding. The night my grandfather died. What could that mean? He had died in his sleep peacefully of old age. That was what the doctor had said. That was what we had all believed. But the letter suggested otherwise. It suggested there was more to the story, something hidden, something secret. I didn't tell David right away. I didn't tell anyone. I needed to think. I needed to understand what this could mean. The letter could be a hoax, a cruel joke by someone looking to stir up trouble. But it could also be real. It could be the key to a mystery I hadn't even known existed. I thought about my grandfather's death. I had been 14. I remembered getting the call in the middle of the night, my mother's voice thick with tears. I remembered the funeral, the cold formality, the reading of the will that shattered everything. but I didn't remember anything unusual about his death itself. He was old, he was sick, he died in his sleep. It was sad, but not surprising, wasn't it? I started asking questions, quietly, carefully. I called Mr. Sterling, my grandfather's old lawyer. He was retired now, living in a nursing home, but his mind was still sharp. "Mr. Sterling," I said, after the usual pleasantries, "I have a strange question about my grandfather's death." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "What kind of question? Do you remember anything unusual about it? Anything that seemed off?" Another pause, longer this time. "Why are you asking, Catherine?" "I received a letter, an anonymous letter. It suggested that there might be more to the story than we knew." Mr. Sterling was quiet for so long I thought he had hung up. Then he said, in a voice I barely recognized, "I've wondered about that night for 20 years. I've never said anything, I had no proof, but I wondered." My blood ran cold. "What did you wonder?" "I wondered why your grandfather's personal physician, Dr. Evans, retired so suddenly after his death. I wondered why he moved out of state and never came back. I wondered why the death certificate listed cause of death as heart failure when your grandfather had a strong heart. He was frail, yes. His body was failing. But his heart, that heart was the strongest thing about him." I felt the world tilt. Are you suggesting something happened?" "I'm not suggesting anything, Catherine. I'm just telling you what I wondered. For 20 years, I've wondered. And now you're calling me with an anonymous letter. Maybe it's time to stop wondering." I thanked him and hung up. My hands were shaking. Dr. Evans. I remembered him vaguely, a quiet man with gentle hands who had come to the house regularly to check on my grandfather. After grandfather died, he had disappeared from our lives. I had never thought anything of it. People retired. People moved. It happened. But now, combined with the letter, it felt like something more. I made a decision. I would go to the address. I would find out the truth, but I wouldn't go alone. The letter said to come alone, but I had learned the hard way that secrets fester in isolation. I needed someone I trusted. I needed Mark. I called him and asked him to come over. When he arrived, I showed him the letter. He read it, his face growing darker with each word. "What do you think it means?" he asked. "I don't know, but I'm going to find out. And I want you to come with me." "The letter says alone." "I know what it says, but I'm done playing by other people's rules. If there's a truth out there, I want it, but I don't want to face it alone." Mark nodded slowly. "Okay. When do we go?" The next day, we drove to Portland together. The address led us to an old apartment building on the edge of the city, a tired structure with peeling paint and a broken buzzer system. We waited in the lobby, unsure of what to do next. After a few minutes, a woman appeared. She was old, perhaps in her 80s, with white hair and a face lined by years. She looked at us with sharp, assessing eyes. "You came," she said. "Both of you, the letter said alone." "I know," I said, "but I don't do alone anymore. This is my cousin Mark, we're family, we face things together." The woman studied Mark, then nodded slowly. "Family, yes, that's what this is about. Family," she gestured for us to follow her. "Come, there are things you need to know." We followed her up a narrow staircase to a small apartment on the 3rd floor. It was cluttered with books and papers, the home of someone who had lived a long time and kept everything. She gestured for us to sit on a worn couch while she lowered herself into an armchair. "My name is Margaret Evans," she said. "I am the widow of Dr. Richard Evans, your grandfather's physician." I felt my heart stop. Dr. Evans, the man Mr. Sterling had mentioned. "My husband died 5 years ago," Margaret continued. "Before he died, he told me something he had carried for 20 years, a secret that ate at him every single day. He made me promise to reveal it when the time was right, when I felt the family was ready to hear the truth." She reached into a drawer beside her chair and pulled out an envelope, yellowed with age. "This is my husband's confession, written in his own hand. He was too much of a coward to come forward while he was alive. He let the secret die with him, but he couldn't let it die completely. He wanted the truth to be known, eventually." She handed me the envelope. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were several pages, covered in cramped handwriting. I began to read aloud, my voice shaking. "I, Dr. Richard Evans, do hereby confess to my role in the death of Edward Thorne. What I did was wrong. I have lived with the guilt every day since. I hope that by writing this, I can somehow make amends, even if only after my death." Mark moved closer, reading over my shoulder. The confession continued. On the night Edward Thorne died, I received a phone call from his daughter, Irene Thorne. She asked me to come to the house immediately. She said her father was ill, that he needed me. When I arrived, I found Edward in his bed. He was alive, but weak. Irene was there, along with her brother, William. They told me they needed my help. I stopped reading, looking up at Margaret. Her face was impassive, but her eyes were wet. They asked me to do something, I continued reading. They asked me to administer a sedative, something to help Edward sleep. I thought nothing of it at first. He often had trouble sleeping. I prepared the injection and gave it to him. He fell asleep within minutes. The next words made my blood run cold. What I couldn't know, was that Irene had already given him something. A stronger sedative, mixed into his evening tea. The combination was too much for his weakened system. He stopped breathing in his sleep. When I realized what had happened, it was too late. He was gone. Mark made a sound, a low moan of disbelief. I kept reading. Irene and William told me that if I revealed the truth, they would blame me. They would say I had administered a fatal dose, that I had killed their father. I was terrified. I had a wife, children. I couldn't go to prison, so I kept silent. I signed the death certificate listing heart failure. I retired early and moved away. I have lived with this guilt for 20 years. I know that what I did was wrong. I know that I am complicit in a death, but I was afraid. I was a coward, and for that I will never forgive myself. The confession ended there. I looked up at Margaret, tears streaming down my face. Mark sat frozen beside me, his face pale as death. My husband was not a bad man, Margaret said quietly. He was a weak man, there's a difference. He made a terrible choice, and it haunted him until his dying day. He hoped that by writing this, by leaving the truth behind, he could somehow make it right. I don't know if that's possible, but I know that you deserve to know. My aunt and my father, Mark whispered. They killed him. They killed grandfather. It appears so, Margaret said. The combination of sedatives was too much. They may not have intended to kill him. They may have only wanted to keep him sedated, to buy time, to figure out how to change the will. But the result was the same. He died because of their actions. I thought about my father, the man who had raised me, the man who had looked at me with hatred after the will was read. He had been complicit in murder. He had helped kill his own father, and then he had let me carry the guilt of the family's destruction for 20 years. Why? I whispered. Why would they do it? Your grandfather was going to change the will, Margaret said. He had already told Irene and William that he was leaving everything to you. They were desperate. They thought if they could keep him alive, they could change his mind. They thought if they could buy time, they could convince him to reconsider. They didn't mean to kill him, but they did. Mark stood up abruptly, pacing the small apartment. His face was a mask of anguish and rage. My mother killed grandfather, and my uncle helped her. And then they let us all believe it was natural causes. They let us tear each other apart over the will, and all the time they were murderers. Mark, I said softly, reaching for him. He pulled away, too agitated to be touched. All those years, he said, his voice cracking. All those years I hated you. I blamed you for everything. And it was them. It was always them. I understood his pain. I felt it too, a deep, wrenching grief for the family we could have been, for the lives we could have lived if not for that one terrible night. Margaret watched us with sad eyes. I'm sorry, she said. I'm sorry for the pain this causes, but I believed you had a right to know. My husband is gone. Irene and William are gone. There's no one left to punish. But the truth should not die with them. We stayed in that apartment for a long time, asking questions, trying to piece together the full story. Margaret told us everything she knew, everything her husband had told her. The picture that emerged was one of desperation, of fear, of a terrible mistake that spiraled into a lifetime of lies. When we finally left, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Mark and I walked to the car in silence. We didn't speak during the drive home. There was nothing to say. The truth was too huge, too overwhelming, too painful. When we reached the mansion, Lily was waiting on the porch. She took one look at our faces and knew something was terribly wrong. What happened? She asked. What's going on? We told her. We sat her down in the living room and we told her everything. The confession, the sedatives, the role her mother and my father had played in our grandfather's death. Lily listened in stunned silence. When we finished, she didn't speak for a long time. Then she stood up, walked to the window, and stared out at the darkening garden. "My mother was a murderer," she said quietly. "My mother killed her own father." "It was an accident," I said, reaching for some comfort, any comfort. "They didn't mean to kill him. They just wanted to buy time." "It doesn't matter," Lily said, her voice hollow. "They gave him something, they made a choice, and he died. That's murder, that's what it is." Mark went to her, standing beside her at the window. "We're not them, Lily. We're not responsible for what they did." "I know," she whispered, "but they're still my parents, they're still yours, and they did this. They did this to our family." We stood together in the gathering darkness, three cousins bound by blood and tragedy, trying to make sense of a truth that made no sense at all. The days that followed were the hardest of my life, harder than the years of isolation, harder than the loss of my father's love, harder than the revelation of my mother's secret. This was different. This was the foundation of our family history crumbling beneath us. I told my mother. It was the most difficult conversation we had ever had. She listened in horror as I recounted Dr. Evans's confession. When I finished, she was pale as paper. "William," she whispered. "My William, he was there, he helped. He did." She closed her eyes and tears slipped down her cheeks. "I knew he was weak. I knew he was desperate for his father's approval. But this, I never imagined he was capable of this. He didn't mean to kill him, Mom. None of them did. It was a terrible mistake. A mistake that destroyed our family. A mistake that cost your grandfather his life." She opened her eyes and looked at me. "How do we live with this, Catherine? How do we go on knowing what they did?" I took her hands in mine. "We go on the same way we always have. One day at a time. One choice at a time. We're not them. We're not responsible for their sins. We're only responsible for our own." She nodded slowly, but I could see the weight of it settling on her shoulders. The man she had loved, the father of her child, had been complicit in murder. It was a truth that would take years to fully process. The hardest part was Alina. She was too young to understand, too innocent to carry this burden. But she sensed the sadness in the house, the heaviness that had descended on all of us. She asked questions we couldn't answer. She wanted to know why Mommy was sad, why Uncle Mark was quiet, why Aunt Lily cried so much. We did our best to shield her, to keep her world bright and safe. But children are perceptive. They feel what adults try to hide. One evening, as I was tucking her into bed, she looked up at me with her big, serious eyes. "Mommy, is everything okay?" I wanted to lie. I wanted to tell her yes, everything was fine, go to sleep. But something in her gaze made me tell the truth, as much as she could understand. "Mommy is sad right now, sweetheart. Something happened a long time ago, something sad, and we just found out about it. But it doesn't change how much I love you. It doesn't change that you are safe and loved and surrounded by people who care about you." She thought about this for a moment. Is the sad thing going to go away? Eventually. Sad things do go away eventually. They leave scars, but they go away. She reached up and touched my face. "I love you, Mommy. I love you too, Alina. More than anything in the whole world." She fell asleep holding my hand. I stayed there for a long time, watching her breathe, feeling the warmth of her small body. This was why we had to go on. This was why we had to find a way through the pain. For her, for the future. For the innocent souls who deserved a world better than the one we had inherited. Months passed. The initial shock faded, replaced by a dull, persistent ache. We talked about going public with the confession, about exposing the truth to the world. But what would be the point? Everyone involved was dead. The legal system couldn't touch them. The only people who would be hurt by public exposure were us. The living, the innocent. We decided to keep the confession private. It was a difficult choice, one that weighed on all of us. Part of me wanted the world to know the truth, to clear my name once and for all. But another part recognized that the truth wouldn't clear me. It would just add another layer of scandal to the Thorne family history. The tabloids would have a field day. Alina would grow up knowing her great-aunt and great-uncle were murderers. The pain would never end, so we kept the secret. We added it to the collection of family truths that we carried in our hearts, sharing it only with each other, drawing strength from our shared burden. But secrets, as I had learned, have a way of shaping us whether we speak them or not. The knowledge of what my father had done changed how I saw him. The few positive memories I had of him, the rare moments of kindness, the glimpses of the man he could have been, they were all tainted now. I couldn't think of him without seeing him standing over my grandfather's bed, helping to administer the drugs that would end his life. I started seeing a therapist, something I had never done before. I needed help processing the layers of trauma, the decades of pain, the constant revelations that seemed to have no end. My therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Chen, helped me understand that healing was not a destination but a process. It was not about reaching a point where the pain disappeared. It was about learning to carry it without being crushed by it. "You've been through more than most people could bear," she told me one session. "And yet here you are, still standing, still loving, still fighting for your family. That takes incredible strength." "Sometimes I don't feel strong," I admitted. "Sometimes I feel like I'm one more revelation away from falling apart completely." That's normal. Strength isn't about never feeling weak. It's about continuing even when you feel weak. It's about getting up one more time than you fall down. Her words stayed with me. They became a mantra I repeated to myself on hard days. Get up one more time than you fall down. Mark found his own path through the pain. He threw himself into his work at the company, channeling his energy into projects that made a difference. He started a foundation in my grandfather's name, dedicated to sustainable forestry and community development. He traveled to schools and community centers, speaking about the importance of protecting our natural resources. The man who had hidden from the world for 15 years became its most passionate advocate. Lily wrote. She wrote about forgiveness, about the complexity of loving people who have done terrible things. Her articles were published in national magazines, reaching audiences far beyond our small corner of Oregon. She became a voice for those struggling with complicated grief, for those trying to reconcile love and betrayal. Her writing was raw and honest, and it touched people in ways she never expected. My mother painted. The darkness that had haunted her work for so long lifted completely. Her new paintings were full of light, full of hope, full of the joy she had finally found. She painted a leaner again and again, capturing her granddaughter's growth in vibrant colors. She painted the garden, the forest, the mansion bathed in sunlight. She painted peace. And I learned to be still. For someone who had spent her life running from the past, from the pain, from the truth, learning to be still was the hardest lesson of all. But I practiced. I sat on the porch and watched the sunset. I walked in the woods and listened to the birds. I held my daughter and felt her heartbeat against my chest. I learned that stillness was not emptiness. It was presence. It was being fully here, fully now, fully alive. When Alina was 7, she started asking questions about her grandparents. Not my mother, whom she knew and loved, but the others. My father, Aunt Irene, Uncle Martin. The ones who were gone. "What were they like?" she asked one evening as we sat on the porch swing together. I considered the question carefully. How do you explain complicated people to a child? How do you tell the truth without causing pain? "They were complicated," I said. "They were people who made good choices and bad choices, just like all of us. They loved their families, even when they didn't show it well. They made mistakes, some of them very big mistakes. And they're gone now, so we can't ask them why they did what they did. We can only try to learn from their lives and be better." Alina thought about this. Were they happy? The question broke my heart. Were they happy? My father drowning in bitterness and alcohol. Aunt Irene consumed by rage until her dying day. Uncle Martin, gentle soul caught in a storm not of his making. Happy. No, they were not happy. No, sweetheart, I don't think they were happy, and that's one of the saddest things about them. They had so much, but they couldn't enjoy it. They were too focused on what they didn't have, on what they thought they deserved. "I'm happy," Alina said simply. "I have you and Daddy and Grandma and Uncle Mark and Aunt Lily. I have the woods and the garden and my room with the paintings. I have everything." I pulled her close, tears pricking my eyes. "Yes, you do. You have everything that matters." That was the gift of the next generation. Alina and the children who would come after her, Mark's future family, Lily's someday children, they would inherit not the bitterness of the past, but the lessons we had learned. They would grow up knowing that money was not the measure of a life. They would know that family was not about competition, but about love. They would know that secrets destroy and truth heals. The inheritance that shattered us would, through them, become something beautiful. The years continued to pass. Alina grew, becoming a young woman with her own dreams and passions. She loved the woods as much as I had as a child, spending hours exploring the trails, learning the names of trees and flowers. She loved my mother's paintings, spending time in the studio, learning to create her own art. She loved Mark's stories of adventure, dreaming of traveling the world. She loved Lily's books, reading late into the night, lost in worlds of imagination. David and I grew older together, our love deepening with each passing year. We had our challenges, as all couples do, but we faced them together. We had learned from the mistakes of those who came before us. We knew that secrets were poison, that honesty was the only foundation for lasting love. We talked about everything, even the hard things, especially the hard things. And in doing so, we built something unshakable. My mother passed away peacefully when Alina was 16. She was painting until the very end, her last work a portrait of our family gathered on the porch, bathed in golden light. It hangs in the mansion's living room now, a reminder of the love that survived everything. At her funeral, I spoke about her life, about her art, about her love, about the impossible choice she had made and the weight she had carried. I spoke about forgiveness, about how she had taught me that love could survive even the deepest wounds. I spoke about her final years, filled with joy and peace and the laughter of her granddaughter. I spoke about the legacy she left, not of money or possessions, but of resilience, of hope, of the belief that even broken things could be made beautiful again. Lily spoke too, sharing memories of the woman who had been like a second mother to her after her own mother's death. Mark spoke about the lessons she had taught him about patience, about kindness, about the power of showing up. Alina spoke last, her voice clear and strong, reading a poem she had written about her grandmother, about the paintings that would live forever, about the love that would never die. After the funeral, the three of us, Lily, Mark, and I, stood together in the garden, looking at the tree with our initials. They were still there, faded but visible. KT, LT, MT. The marks of children who had played together, who had loved each other, who had been torn apart and found their way back. She would have wanted us to be happy, Lily said softly. She would have wanted us to keep going, Mark added. I nodded, looking at the tree, at the initials, at the history carved into its bark. She would have wanted us to remember that family is everything, that no matter what happens, we have each other. We stood together in silence, three cousins who had been through fire and emerged stronger. The sun set behind us, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Somewhere in the house, Alina laughed at something David said. The sound carried through the evening air, bright and pure and full of life. The inheritance that shattered a family had in the end brought us here. To this garden, to this moment, to this peace. It had taken decades and more pain than anyone should have to bear, but we had finally found our way. My name is Catherine. This is the story of my family. It is a story of money and secrets, of betrayal and murder, of loss and grief. But it is also a story of love and forgiveness, of healing and hope, of the incredible resilience of the human heart. We are not perfect. We carry scars, some of them still tender. The past is never fully past. It lives in us, shapes us, reminds us of where we came from, but it does not define us. We define ourselves by the choices we make, by the love we give, by the forgiveness we offer to others and to ourselves. The inheritance that shattered us also, in the end, gave us everything. It gave us each other. It gave us the strength to face the truth, no matter how painful. It gave us the courage to forgive, even when forgiveness seemed impossible. It gave us the wisdom to build something new on the ruins of the old. And for that, I am grateful, for all of it. The pain and the joy, the loss and the gain, the darkness and the light, because it all led here, to this porch, to this garden, to this family, broken and mended, shattered and whole. The story does not end. It continues in Alina's laughter, in the paintings on the wall, in the initials carved into the tree, in the love that binds us across generations. The Thorne family lives on, not as a cautionary tale of wealth and greed, but as a testament to the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. My name is Catherine, and this is my family. This is our story. This is our inheritance.